We are over halfway through the decade, and I've finished reading most of what I plan to read from 2024, so I thought it was a really good time to reflect on the last 5 years, the first 5 years of the decade, and tell you what my best 60 novels published between the 1st of January 2020 and the 31st of December 2024 are. Now, I need to give you one quick caveat for this. The website I use to check publication dates uses the first date of publication for a book, and that means that most translated fiction, which was published in its original language to begin with, is published too early to make this list. So rather than dealing with that, I've decided to exclude all translated literature from this video and do a separate video for translated literature that will come out next month. So please make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss that. I guess this is kind of like the Booker Prize, and the Booker International is still coming. Anyway, here's my top 60 books based on the 750-ish books I have read published in that interval. And I'm going to go through them in publication order. The Girl with the Louding Voice by Abi Dare is an emotional but empowering novel set in Nigeria about Adani, a 14-year-old girl who just wants to be educated, and all of the struggles she faces for that very simple goal. Shuggie Bain by Douglas Stewart is about a queer boy growing up in 1980s Glasgow in a broken house with an alcoholic mother. This book will make your heart hurt. Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell. Gorgeous prose fills this historical fiction about the wife and children of England's most famous playwright in his absence. Pew by Catherine Lacey is a creepy novel about identity. When an unidentified person turns up into a town, nobody knows their name, gender, age, or past, and the townsfolk don't know how to feel about them or how to treat them, and that exposes their judgment and the lack of safety and unease we feel towards Pew. Boy Parts by Eliza Clark is a literary horror about the rage of a young, struggling northern female artist who is acerbic, frightening, and constantly underestimated, and most importantly, powerful. Irina treats the world the way she has been treated, whether it deserves it or not. The Death of Vivek Oji by Akwaeke Emezi. The title hints at what might happen to Vivek in this book, as we witness their life through their cousin Osita's eyes. A novel about being queer and trans in Nigeria, but also about love, friendship, and acceptance. Mayflies by Andrew O'Hagan is a book about lifelong friendship and terminal illness, and probably the most moving and depressing novel that I have ever read. Hello Friend, We Miss You by Richard Owain Roberts is a dark comedy set on a remote Welsh island. It's about depression, love, and the attempt to recover from mental illness. Sorrow and Bliss by Meg Mason is another book blending humour and mental illness to create a very readable and highly enjoyable complex character study. Honeybee by Craig Silvey. An unlikely friendship is formed between a queer 14-year-old and an old widowed man after the two coincidentally meet on a bridge where both are intending to take their own lives. Loop Tracks by Sue Orr, a two-timeline novel, one where a young woman is getting on a plane to Sydney to have an abortion, the other 41 years later where she is raising her autistic grandson who is slowly being seduced by far-right influences. Moving on to 2021 books. Detransition Baby by Tori Peters is a novel about queer love, queer relationships, toxic relationships, trans exploitation, and trans parenthood. How the One-Armed Sister Sweeps Her House by Sherry Jones is about domestic violence, drug trafficking, petty crimes, not so petty crime, murder, and motherhood, all clashing in this very dark novel set in Paradise, Barbados. Unsettled Ground by Claire Fuller. Sheltered middle-aged twins must face the world after their mother passes away. The threat of poverty becomes very real after it is revealed that they do not own their house and they are behind on their rent. Struggling with stigma, disability, mental illness, and social anxiety, the world is about to eat the twins becomes whole. No One Is Talking About This by Patricia Lockwood, an offbeat comedy about the internet and the real world, is suddenly rocked by some all too real news closer to the protagonist's home. The performance by Claire Thomas, we follow three women as they watch a Beckett play while deadly bushfires close in on them as they're unaware. Lean Stand Fall by John McGregor, an Arctic scientist, suffers from a stroke while out on expedition and must learn to deal with severe aphasia, while his wife, who is used to his long-term absences, must learn to be a carer. Before My Actual Heart Breaks by Tish Delaney, a Northern Irish Catholic girl growing up during the Troubles, Mary dreams of escaping her abusive parents, but her life takes an unexpected turn when at 16 she turns pregnant. Daryl by Jackie S., a queer novel about relationships, trans identity, being gay, and most centrally, the life of a cuck. Echolalia by Bryony Doyle. Before Emma is struggling to cope with her 3 children, her absent husband, and her overbearing mother-in-law. After, Emma is institutionalized and about to get out, but Robbie, who was only a baby in the before timeline, is absent from the after timeline. Why? Assembly by Natasha Brown. A young black woman is about to attend an event at her white boyfriend's family estate and is struggling with social expectations and high work demands, as well as the realities of race and class. The Bread the Devil Need by Lisa Allen Augustini. A Trinidadian woman is trapped in a very violent and abusive relationship while she is also having an affair with her boss. Will she survive the relationship? When Things Are Alive, They Hum by Hannah Bent. A woman with Down syndrome is diagnosed with a heart condition and then is denied a life-saving transplant. We follow her sister as she tries to save her sister and fights for the heart she so readily needs, but constantly rejects out of fear that she will stop loving the people that she loves. The Book of Form and Emptiness by Ruth Ozeki. Following the death of his father, a teenage boy begins to hear voices and make strange new friends. Meanwhile, his mother, struggling to cope with the stress of her work, develops a hoarding habit, placing her and her son at risk of eviction. Bodies of Light by Jennifer Down. An abused orphan girl grows up desperate for love. When it finally looks like she has found love, she has 3 children, all who die of SIDS before they're 1. As the police close in, she decides to run. Love and Virtue by Diana Reid is a novel about consent and Me Too. When a girl is too drunk to consent to the sex that she has, she is pressured to report the crime by her friend before she is ready to deal with it. Fight Night by Miriam Taves, a dark comedy in which 3 generations of women from one family embark on a road trip as the grandmother struggles with a terminal illness. Small Things Like These by Claire Keegan, a poetically written novella about the Mandolin laundries. Moving on to 2022. Don't Cry For Me by Daniel Black. A black man with terminal illness looks back on his own life and how he has treated his gay son, and both apologizes and explains his strict and homophobic behavior. Glory by No Violet Bulawayo, a hilarious political satire sending up the Mugabe Zimbabwean government and exploring corruption in Zimbabwe, all the while drawing comparisons to current world leaders and regimes. Maps of Our Spectacular Bodies by Maddie Mortimer, a mother with terminal illness and the love she has for her soon-to-be orphaned daughter, told in 2 timelines with 3 points of view. This book asks both the very big questions about immortality and also the very little questions about love and family. If an Egyptian Cannot Speak English by Noor Naga. An American woman returns to the homeland she has never known, Egypt, and starts a relationship with a struggling photographer who is poor and addicted to drugs. As their romance turns violent, what appears to be a feminist novel takes on many extra dimensions after the author makes an unusual choice with the ending. I'm a Fan by Sheena Patel, a raw and impactful novel about obsession and asymmetry in relationships and race. A brown girl obsessed with her white male friend who is stringing her along while also dating a white blonde influencer. An Olive Grove in Ends by Moses Mackenzie, a coming-of-age novel about a young black man who is trying to get ahead in the world. He falls in love with a pastor's daughter, but in order to provide for them, he turns to drug dealing against her wishes. The Poet by Louisa Reed, a relationship novel about a university student and an aspiring poet who is in a relationship with her English professor, who starts telling her she isn't good enough to write, while at the same time stealing her ideas. Milk Teeth by Jessica Andrews, a novel about a relationship that is equal parts passionate and fraught, that explores body image, diet culture, self and class. Luscious prose set these themes against the hedonistic setting of Barcelona and their lavish and tempting gastronomic bounty of restaurants. Fane by Anne-Marie MacDonald, a historical fiction in the Victorian style, combining great storytelling with complex ideas. Set in Fane, a land between England and Scotland that is simultaneously both and neither, something that is reflected in one of the main characters being secretly intersexed. A recently widowed father seems to be keeping secrets about his wife from his super intelligent daughter. What will she find out as she begins to explore her family past? Moving on to 2023, The Deluge by Stephen Markley, a sprawling climate fiction novel that predicts the next 40 years of our existence, that attacks our political system with razor-sharp cynicism and parody, and examines the gradually declining quality of the politicians we have to choose between, and just when climate action may be realistic. Wade in the Water by Naomi Nkrumah. Set in the 80s, in a rural, racially divided Mississippi town, a white woman moves into the black side of town and makes friends with a pre-teen black girl, tutoring her in English. The novel explores the influences and the struggle to break free from our past and our parents, and does not shy away from some of the more disturbing parts of our society, all the time reflecting on race. Birnam Wood by Eleanor Catton, a modern Shakespearean tragedy about a group of activists and off-gridders who suddenly receive funding from a billionaire whose motives are at best confusing. In Memoriam by Alice Wynne, a love story set during World War I. This novel has personally been the best at describing and getting me to empathise with the horrors of the First World War, and specifically on how it impacted the soldiers' lives afterwards and the dark way it changed them forever, reflecting on just how hard it was for them to open up and love somebody or be loved after facing the war. Enter Ghost by Isabella Hammett. A newly single actor in her late 30s returns home to Haifa and witnesses her people's further displacement. She meets a group of actors who are performing Hamlet in Arabic and agrees to play Gertrude, something that becomes an act of defiance towards Israeli occupation. How to Build a Boat by Elaine Feeney. A genius but socially challenged boy who misses his recently deceased mother wants to build a time machine to see her again, but is persuaded to build a boat by two teachers. All three are outcasts and form an unlikely friendship. This is tender, charming, funny, emotional, uplifting, and miserable, all at the same time. Soldier Sailor by Claire Kilroy, the best book about motherhood you will ever read. Chain Gang All-Stars by Nana Kwame Ajay Brenner, a speculative novel about a prison system that allows prisoners to fight for their freedom in televised death matches. A novel that is brilliantly critical of the commercialization of our justice system, but doesn't shy away from also telling an amazing story. The Bee Sting by Paul Murray. Everybody that isn't called Brian loved this book. An amazing family saga about a prosperous family who own the local car dealership, but seem to be powerless to prevent it sliding into financial ruin, as each member of the family has their own issues that they prefer to focus on. A novel about secrets and the damage they can cause. Night Bloom by Peace Adzo Meadi, a novel that repeats itself from a different point of view, allowing you to see how cousins and best friends growing up in Ghana fell out and stopped talking to each other. Ordinary Human Failings by Megan Nolans. A toddler is found murdered. An 8-year-old girl is the suspect. The press are desperate for news of this migrant Irish family that raised a 8-year-old murderer. A desperate tale of a sad family history combined with a critique of the unethical behaviour of our media. Sunburn by Chloe Michelle Howarth, a coming-of-age novel set in the 1990s in Ireland, when a teenager falls in love with her best friend and has to ward off attempts at seduction from the boy the town assumes she will marry. Will she make a choice to keep her family happy and cede to societal expectation, or will she break the mould and be an out lesbian? Evil Eye by Etaf Rum. A Palestinian-American woman is unhappy with her relationship, but is constantly told her husband is wonderful for putting up with her, providing for her, and never hitting her. This forces her to confront her childhood trauma caused by her father beating her mother as she attempts to advocate for what she wants in a relationship. Moving on to 2024. The Great Undoing by Charlene Alsop, a dystopian novel in which all the Earth's satellites have been sabotaged, and our protagonist is a truth teller, somebody dedicated to correcting the histories that have been erased or changed. A novel tackling how stories are recorded and retold with bias, all told with an Indigenous flavour. Anita de Monte Laughs Last by Xochitl Gonzalez. A toxic relationship between a Latin American woman and a white man is investigated 15 years after her death by a Latin American PhD student craving the sight of somebody like her in the art world, somebody who has been erased from her vision. This is based on the life of Anna Mendita. James by Percival Everett, a retelling of Huckleberry Finn from the point of view of Jim, a companion piece to the novel that gives Twain's book a black perspective that he was unable to include himself. Anibot by Sierra Greer, a novel about a robot built to be a sex doll, but who has consciousness, bringing into question consent, ownership, and the profitability of a business creating and selling these robots. The Safekeep by Yael van der Vouden. When her brother's fiancée stays in her house, Eva is strangely attracted to her, but also questions why items in the house keep vanishing. The Lost Love Songs of Boise Sing by Ingrid Persaud, a historical fiction about a real-life Trinidadian pirate who murdered over 400 people, told by the 4 women he loved. The 4 women become the protagonist of the novel, and it is much more about their lives and how this drug lord pirate impacted and changed them. The Coast Road by Alan Murren. The lives of 3 women in 1994 County Donegal, the year before divorce was legalised in Ireland. A poet has left her husband, who is blocking her visiting her son. A woman overwhelmed by motherhood is married to a serial cheater, and a woman is trapped in an abusive relationship. How do these 3 relationships link to create a really thrilling, both plot-based and character-based story? There Are Rivers in the Sky by Alif Shafak. 4 stories told across generations. A Mesopotamian king orders the building of a library. A Victorian orphan with a photographic memory escapes poverty through his fascination with ancient Mesopotamian tablets. A Yazidi girl and her grandmother embark on a journey through ISIS-controlled lands in order to be baptized, and a hydrologist who has just divorced her husband moves into a houseboat and quickly becomes close friends with her new landlord. Intermezzo by Sally Rooney. 2 brothers, one dating a woman 10 years his senior, the other dating a woman 10 years his junior, while still in love with his first girlfriend, somebody his own age. A novel about the complexities of relationships and how age impacts that. Shy Creatures by Claire Chambers. Set in the 60s when psychology was rapidly changing, a man is discovered in a house with a beard down to his waist. As we see aspects of his dark past come to light, they mirror the clandestine relationship between his nurse and his doctor. That is all 60 books. A list like this is not just subjective, but it depends on the books I have read. But in the comments, what I would really like to know is the lesser known books you think I've missed out, the books that it is more likely that I haven't read yet. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Bye bye.